Dr. Bates is here as well. So what I'm going to ask is all of the panelists for sure put on your cameras, and all of the participants, you're welcome to put on your cameras too. This is going to be a conversation, and I want you all to be interactive. You can feel free to ask questions in the chat. I also have questions to ask as well to get the ball rolling. And then if you're comfortable and you want to ask your question traditionally, verbally, you can go ahead and do so. I just ask that you use the raise hand button so that I would be able to see you, and you can ask your questions. So welcome to this panel, this medical school panel. Our panel today consists of current medical students, one of whom is in her preclinical years and the other is in their clinical years, and they'll explain that a little later when they introduce themselves. We also have two resident physicians who are physicians in training. They have their medical degrees, but they're training to become neurologists on the panel. And we also have one practicing neurologist who's also specialized in neuro-ophthalmology. So you're gonna talk to people in different stages of their medical career and get some insights into their career path in this panel. My name is Dr. Ima Abong. I'm an assistant professor of neurology here at the University of Kentucky College of Medicine. I'm also the director of diversity and inclusion for our department, and it's a pleasure to host this panel. So I'm going to start by asking our participants to give a brief introduction, 2 to 3 minutes, about themselves. So I'll start with our medical student panelists, and then we'll move on up to our physician panelists. So I'll start with Maya Cleveland. Hi, Maya.
Hello. So yes, my name is Maya Cleveland. I'm a first-year medical student. Just a little bit of background about myself. I went to UK for undergrad, got my bachelor's in agricultural biotechnology, graduated in 2018, and then went to grad school and got my master's in medical sciences. And then I took another year off to work and prepare for medical school in my application. Worked as a contact tracer for a bit. And yeah, and I started in the fall, this past fall. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Maya. Madison, are you at a place where you can introduce yourself?
Yes. So hi, I'm Madison. I'm a third-year medical student here at UK. So just a little bit about my background to getting to where I currently am at. I did my undergrad here at UK, majored in neuroscience and minored in French. And when I graduated, took my MCAT, didn't do as well as I needed to do. So got into a master's program here, the Master's in Medical Science program. Graduated from that, reapplied and had got in. And so, yeah, I think that's how I got to where we're at.
Thank you, Madison. Okay, next we'll move on to our resident physicians. I'll start with Dr. Molly Bates.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Molly Bates. I'm a second-year neurology resident. I'm from Pikeville, Kentucky. I went to Eastern Kentucky University for undergrad and then was happy to be accepted to UK. I only applied to the 3 medical schools in Kentucky because I knew I wanted to stay close to home, and was happy to be accepted to UK. I did medical school there and decided to stay here for residency as well. So I'm one of these long-term Kentucky people.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Dr. Rodolfo Louis. He is one of our child neurology resident physicians. Dr. Louis.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rodolfo. I'm kind of the opposite of Molly. I was born in Puerto Rico, and I've been bouncing around ever since. I don't think I've spent more than 5 years in one place since I left my first house. And so I'm the 5th year for child neurology. I'm the chief resident. I went to in Miami for my undergrad, did med school in Dominican Republic, so out of the country. And now I'm here in Kentucky. I'm loving it.
Thank you. And finally, I will let Dr. Padmaja Sudhakar introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Padmaja Sudhakar. I'm also from a very far place. I'm from India originally. I did medical school in India. I did an ophthalmology residency in India. I was a practicing ophthalmologist and a neuro-ophthalmologist in India. Then I moved to the United States. I started off with a fellowship in neuro-ophthalmology in University of Michigan and suddenly got interested in neurology. So then I came to UK and I did my neurology residency. And then I have stayed back here as faculty. I've been here now for 6 years. And it's been a really exciting experience. So yeah, so like diverse, two different Asia and then now America. So, you know.
All right, thank you all for introducing yourselves. And a reminder to all of the participants in the audience, you're welcome to put your questions in the chat. I will start off asking questions, so please feel free and feel comfortable to ask questions to our panelists. So my first question to the panel is, why did you choose a career in medicine, specifically becoming a physician? As we know, there are different career paths in the medical field. You can become a nurse, a physical therapist, a pharmacist, a physician's assistant, a nurse practitioner. So why medicine? So I'll start first with the medical students because they're still in medical school and they're training. So why career in medicine?
I can go first. So the reason why I chose medicine, it kind of started in high school. A teacher kind of noticed that I really liked her biology class, and she recommended that I do a camp at UK called AHEC. And so my junior year of high school, I did the camp, and it's basically a 4-week camp where you get to shadow different physicians, and you kind of get to take or experience some of the classes that medical students take. And I really enjoyed it. And so from that moment on, I was like, I definitely want to do medicine. And then just witnessing the collaborative effort in medicine and that leadership role of being a physician, I really liked that part as well. And just medicine for me is an outlet of how I want to give back to my community and my family. So that's pretty much why I chose this career path.
All right. Well, since someone asked Dr. Louis, I don't answer that question, but specifically, why did you choose to go to medical school in the Dominican Republic, as well as why did you go into medicine?
Yeah, so I'll start with why I went into medicine. So my sister was born with DiGeorge syndrome, so 22q11 deletion, and I actually knew I wanted to be a doctor since I was 4 years old. I think that's for two reasons. Number one is, from a personal standpoint, it came from a place of wanting to understand my sister, obviously, and I think that over the years has developed into a point where I like to understand how and why people think the way that they do, and so from a professional standpoint, I think that the best way I could do that, the best position that puts me in a place to see and understand all of the puzzle as opposed to maybe a specific aspect of it, is the physician role. And so that's why I chose that particular role in healthcare instead of one of the other ones. Why I went to med school in Dominican Republic, I went there primarily because my family was there at the time. They had moved there while I was in college and I wanted to be close to them. And this was one of the med schools that I knew was accredited in the United States. And they were able to give like federal loans and stuff for the US to go there. It was obviously significantly cheaper, which was a bonus. And yeah, and so I don't regret going there. I think it's a very different experience. I think medical school in the US is a lot better at teaching you the protocol stuff. And so I felt that when I came into residency, I sort of had to learn that. But on the flip side of that, I had already done a lot of things in the Dominican Republic because there's a lot of less regulations there. So that fear of that apprehension of like going to talk to a patient or or engaging and being hands-on, I had gone through that years before starting residency. So there's pros and cons to it.
Okay. Dr. Sudhakar, from an attending perspective, why did you get into medicine now, specifically neurology and neuro-ophthalmology, and any other insights you want to add?
So neurology was because of neuro-ophthalmology. I started off my career as an ophthalmologist and then started doing neuro-ophthalmology. So neuro-ophthalmology is one field where I think having the background both in ophthalmology and in neurology really helps. When I was an ophthalmologist and practicing neuro-ophthalmology, I used to struggle with understanding some things because I wasn't trained in neurology, but then I saw the big deficit, and that's why, after I decided to do another residency, and neurology has really changed a lot of things for me because it gives me a wider perspective of this field. It's a very unique field where two disciplines come together, so that really helps.
Okay. Thank you. Simultaneously, some of the things that are easy to answer in the chat, we'll put answers. Like, for instance, someone asked specifically, how can they be involved in programs as an undergraduate, specifically involved in neurology and during the pandemic. I put one, and I'll put out the programs, one program that I put the link to, since this is recorded, I just want to say it out loud so people will know. Is the University of Kentucky Summer Medical Observership Program. So for those of you listening to the recording and can't see the chat, you can just Google University of Kentucky Summer Medical Observership Program. It's an annual summer observership program. And many faculty in neurology participate on one of them. I actually had a student who was a neuroscience student who participated in the program, and she shadowed and observed me for the summer. And it's a really good program. And there are other medical specialties too, but there are some neurology attendants that participate in this program. So if you're interested, that's one way. And we'll put other ways as well in the chat. So to keep going with the questions, and thank you so much for posting so many questions. This next question is for Dr. Bates. I'm also from Eastern Kentucky. Do you plan on practicing rural medicine? If so, how did your roots play into your decision? And this is from Dalton McCown.
Thank you, Dalton. So a lot of factors played into my decision to go into medicine, but I'll just speak to this, and a lot of them have been repeated by other providers on here, but I'll just speak to that specifically, how my roots played into it. So again, on theme, I'm the opposite of Dr. Louie, apparently. I think it was good choosing the two of us in a panel because we're different. I did not know I wanted to be a doctor from the age of 4. I thought I wanted to be a writer my whole life. I wanted to write books, and I really wanted to write books about issues related to Appalachia, things like mountaintop removal, things like stigma related to being an Appalachian American. But when I was a junior and senior in high school, a lot of members of my family got sick around the same time. So my Mimi got sick, my Aunt Hazel got sick, and my nephew was a newborn, and he was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. And all of these family members were having to travel from Pikeville to University of Kentucky to get their care. So that's a 2.5 to 3 hour drive, depending on how much you speed. And I just realized that so Pikeville has some decent medical care, but I realized that it wasn't perfect, or else we wouldn't have to drive so far. So it kind of hit me all at once that the reason I liked writing is because I like people and thinking about people, and that you can be a writer and a doctor at the same time, and that there was a big need for that in my community. So I decided to just take a leap and sign up to be a biology major pre-med. And I honestly thought I might change it, but I instantly fell in love with it, and I've been on that track ever since. And yeah, I would like to go back home to Pikeville to practice, or somewhere near home. We'll just have to convince my husband.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next question. This one is from Jordan Burdett. And I'm trying to answer as many in the chat because I want the students to have a voice. If I see there's a lull, I have other questions to ask, but I want the students to get their questions out first. So Jordan asks, what challenges have you had to overcome on your medical journey or beginning of your career? What habits have you developed to help you be successful? And have you thought about neurosurgery? What is something I would like to go into? So since those are three questions, let's start with the first one. What challenges have you had to overcome on your medical journey or at the beginning of your career? And let's start with Madison Tens. Since we see her now, we can ask Madison.
Actually, it's a little funny because Jordan is one of my mentees. So hi, Jordan. So you may have heard this story a little bit, but in terms of just difficulties to overcome, I grew up in sort of a lower income class household, and so things that I think students wouldn't traditionally think of as barriers, such as getting money to buy books to study for the MCAT and getting money to even be able to take the test, and then now crossing that barrier, being in medical school and realizing that we have to take out loans for survival, just being limited from a financial standpoint in that realm. I think that's probably been one of my bigger personal struggles. And I think something that Jade Townsend just sort of mentioned about imposter syndrome. I think as a woman of color, that has probably been the most sort of inner struggle that I've had to begin to work through. I think a lot of students get to a certain point in their journey and, do all these tests and get this feedback that we're doing great and we're learning things and we're being proficient and there's growth, but there's always sort of this voice of doubt that maybe you're in the wrong space, that you sort of don't belong here, because there is some element of drive. I think everyone sort of in the field has an element of perfectionism, so you always want to be your best, but in that same vein, there's a voice that sometimes can be very discouraging. So I think that that's probably been one of the bigger challenges that I've had to work through, especially being a third year and having more clinical time working with patients and actually starting to fill in the shoes of being a physician.
Thank you, and thank you for highlighting imposter syndrome. I think that from the outside, many people may have misconceptions that, people who pursue this career are, all knowing and, on a high horse. I've heard anything similar to that, but it is important to point that out, that sometimes you feel that you don't belong, especially if you do come up from a background that is traditionally underrepresented or underserved. Molly highlighted being from Appalachia, and you highlighted being a woman of color. So those are things that many of us, deal with, but at the same time, we persevere because this is our goal, this is our dream, and this is what we want to do. We want to help others. And I think overcoming those barriers say a lot, and actually are, that's one of the personality traits I think about when I think of a physician, as somebody who's willing to overcome barriers that might be put in their way to help those who are in need of our services. So thank you for highlighting that.
It's the same with being a foreign medical grad. I think it also fits into the same vein.
Oh, most definitely. You and Dr. Sudhakar, I'm pretty sure that has come up not only in your training, but with applying for residency and applying for jobs, having to explain that. But at the same time, you have to be confident in yourself and know that you're an excellent child neurologist. Dr. Sudhakar is the only, and she didn't say this in her introduction, she's so humble, but she's the only neuro-ophthalmologist here at the University of Kentucky, and patients come from all over the state and outside the state to see her. She is remarkable at what she does. So yeah, imposter syndrome, we're trying to overcome all of that. So I want to get to the rest of Jordan's three-part question. I'm scrolling back. Hold on one second. So the second question he had, what habits have you developed to help you be successful? And I want to hear answers from each career stage, because I think it's important to know what habits to develop early, because most of the people on this call are college students, but then also to see how those habits play a role as you become a physician. And I think it's important to know what habits to get rid of and what habits are good to retain. So let's start with any of the students first, and then we'll go up.
I can go. So I think good habits, I think time management is a big, if not one of the most important sort of habits to start working on in the undergrad stage, because when you first come to undergrad, if you came from living at home with your parents and went to high school and sort of had that moderately supervised space to undergrad, now you are sort of responsible of your time, what you do with your time, and making sure you get things done. Medical school is similar to undergrad in the sense of that freedom, but you have a lot to juggle. There's a lot you have to juggle. And I think, and most importantly, for the longevity of yourself, it's important to start learning to balance in time for self-care and time to do things that you want to do that fuel you and refuel you back up after you give yourself to studying 12 hours for that test, or studying for that OSCE that you have, or that physical exam that you have, because it's exhausting. It can be exhausting. So I think learning how to manage your time in the sense of how many hours am I going to spend a day or a week devoting to refueling myself, whether that's going to the gym, if that's cooking dinner, if that's sitting down, hanging out with your animal, watching Netflix, just making sure that you are balancing that alongside of your work, because I still think it's something that everyone probably works on. I mean, not only in like the stage that I'm in my medical career, but also like the stage that Dr. Obong is at. You have to adapt to things. So just learning to prioritize your time and to know that you're going to have to adapt to that across the phases of your career is a good, I think, like first sort of step towards developing good habits.
I can just echo really quickly on what Madison said about time management. Just because the amount of content that you get each day is so immense, it's very, very critical to learn how to study efficiently and smarter, because it doesn't really matter how many hours you put in. If you're not actually comprehending the material, then you're kind of just wasting time. And also, like she said, adapting. I've had to adapt after each exam depending on how I've done, and now having to adapt now that I've finished anatomy and I'm now in foundations. For me, it's completely different. And so how I study is also going to change kind of drastically. So yes, just learning to adapt, sharpening time management skills, and like she said, making your self-care a priority, just because you can't pour into anything if you yourself are empty. So yeah.
I can go next if that's okay. Just good habits to get into early. Make checklists for everything all the time. I tell this to every third year med student who comes through, and every intern I've worked with, is make a checklist for cleaning your house, for studying, for everything, for the work that you're doing throughout the day, and just check things off as you go to keep your head on straight, because we're not going to be able to, keep track of everything that we have to do because it is so much, but that just makes it a whole lot easier. I also think it's important to, when you're studying, not to just overwhelm yourself with information, but to develop the skill of being able to pick out what from the information you're reading you didn't already know, so that you can, so my study method that I'll just share with you guys briefly to get something really specific on here is that I'll read, so if I'm studying a PowerPoint slide, I'll go through it, I'll read through it the first time, and I'll write down on a piece of paper everything I didn't already know from that slide. And I'll ignore everything I already knew because I knew it. And then so then I end up with sheets of paper that just have all the information that I didn't already know. And then I'll go through all those sheets of paper and I'll highlight everything that I didn't know that time around, that I hadn't already remembered from before. And then right before a test, I'll go through and reread all those things that I highlighted. So that's just kind of a funnel method to get down and make sure that you've retained all of the material.
Yeah, I think all those things are important. I think being a little further along, I'm starting to realize that to me, the things that are important right now, it's less about the personal habits and more about the interpersonal habits. I think learning the idea that everything is a learning experience is really important, particularly the way that you interact with people, the way you talk to people. The people who feel respected and valued when you talk to them, and when they talk to you and you feel that way, vice versa. That's one of the things that I think has made me successful as a resident and as a person. And I think it's one of the things that's going to that we don't really talk about enough. We don't really teach enough. I think now as a community, medicine is starting to value that and give that importance and target that in education. But learning those habits and learning the importance of that and the things that can get you very early on will definitely be to your benefit. Communication is very, very important, and learning how to get along with people, and not just get along, but making people feel valued and respected is really, really important, and it's going to get you a lot further than you think it will.
Hey, I think Mackenzie posted a question. Ima, if you don't mind, I can answer.
You can read the questions that you want to answer. You said Mackenzie. Let me scroll down. Okay, I can jump to that and then we can come back. So Mackenzie Caldwell wrote, did you pursue other interests in your undergrad that were not medical related, like a club or a volunteer opportunity? Would participating in these non-medical activities take away from your medical school application? And I think that is an important question. Dr. Sudhakar, do you want to answer that since you're faculty and also familiar with, admissions and things like that?
Okay, so I'm from a medical school, from a foreign medical school, and I did have other interests which were not medical related. I was like a fine arts secretary for my college in my medical school, and we went to we did so many activities, and we did cultural programs and all stuff like that, and it definitely helped me learn leadership qualities. It's not easy doing those jobs. And then if you're asking, would that take away from your medical school application? I don't think so, because we also sit on the committee that review residency applications, and I review applications for ophthalmology. And some of the star applicants are people who've had a very active, career throughout. So there are medical students who've taken a year off, gone and done mission work. There are medical students who've taken a break from their, or even undergrad students. I've seen undergrad students go and do mission work. Medical students take a break during their medical career and go and do 1 or 2 years in the NIH doing research. So there have been different kinds of activities. And I look at all these things. We are not just looking for someone, with very good scores and, those are very important. But I think someone who's got a lot of other activities, have shown leadership roles, have volunteered and participated in different kinds of clubs, I think it makes a lot of difference. So last year, one of the star medical students that we interviewed, she was like a top-notch gymnast, you know, from her high school and college. And then when she came to medical school, she gave up. So, you know, those kind of applications are always attractive because it's someone who gave their heart and soul despite regular school, college, trying to, you know, do these other activities and be a star in both. I think it calls for a lot of commitment. So those are definitely going to be valued from my perspective.
Hey, I just want to add that echo everything Dr. Sudhakar said. You just have to meet the requirements really to get into medical school in the US. And so you have to take the college level, biology, biochemistry, physics, mathematics. So you have to meet the requirements. And this is something you can discuss with your pre-med advisor to make sure you're on track. But you can major in anything. You don't have to major in pure biology or chemistry. One of my classmates in medical school was actually a chef. Like he went to culinary arts school and he was in New York and France. And then he went to medical school. I did engineering. I was a biomedical engineer. You have people who major in history, I mean, anything, but you have to just meet the requirements. Once you meet the requirements, and like Dr. Sudhakar said, you have a well-rounded education, you can get into medical school. So I just wanted to reinforce that you don't have to just major in biology. Just make sure you get your pre-med classes taken care of.
Yeah, I had a buddy in college who was pre-med and he was a music major. You know, so I think something that I wish I would have heard when I was in college and applying to med school and as in med school applying to residency is nothing that you're passionate about and nothing that showcases who you are and what you like doing with your life outside of medicine will ever be a detriment to your application. I think it would be worse, and I think it comes off in your application when you do a lot of different things that you're really not interested in just to have something on your application, than if you have one very specific interest that you're really, really passionate about and that it comes off in the way you talk about it. So again, the most important thing is to truly represent yourself. And if there's something that you really love or several things that you really love, then I don't think that's ever going to be a detriment in your application, even if there's other gaps as we perceive them.
Okay. Another question I think is very timely. This came from Randy Osborne. What are the best tips and recommendations for students preparing for the MCAT and medical school applications? I think this is a good question for Maya and Madison, since they're the closest. Like, what were your study methods for MCAT? Like, how did you prepare for that?
I could go. So I'll just start off saying that I am not the best test taker in the world at all. That's just something I've always struggled with throughout my entire educational path. But that being said, I think some of the things that helped me prepare for my MCAT specific to sort of help compensate for that testing deficit is when this is sort of specific, but make sure you actually review your tests. I've done like a lot of mentoring and I've spoken on pre-med panels before, and I think something that I commonly hear is that when students take their practice test, they can't talk to me about why they're missing those sorts of questions or why they're struggling with a certain concept. And I think, you know, being able to understand why you're missing a problem is critical in being able to effectively change how you respond to similar questions. And I think that's a habit also. It's important for medical school as well. You sit down and you have a quiz, or we have tests after each block. If like sorry, there's a helicopter. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me all right, Dr. Yvonne? There's like a helicopter.
Yeah, briefly, we couldn't hear you, but now we can hear you.
Okay. I just think, developing good testing habits, such as reviewing what questions you missed and why you missed them, is essential to improving. And then making sure you understand that this test is not life or death. And I think for me, it's the anxiety of not doing as well as I want to do that inhibits me from doing my best. So I think there's a mental component to taking these standardized tests, but then there's an intellectual component of, do you understand the material? Can you apply the material? And if you get things wrong, do you understand why you're getting them wrong? So I think in a broad scope, just making sure you check off those boxes in your MCAT prep would be some strategies that I'd recommend.
Yeah, so I would agree with everything that Madison just said. And for me personally, just after doing content review, just something you have to do. I did about 10 practice exams each week leading up to my exam. I made it very, I tried to mimic testing, environment as much as possible. And then after each exam, most likely the next day, I would review it very thoroughly and, try to understand why I got things wrong. And then, review that content and then take another exam the following week. But also, content is very important, but also knowing how to take the exam is also very important. And there are a lot of resources out there that go into depth about patterns to look for, some test taking strategies and things like that, which I think are also very important when taking the MCAT. And so, yeah, that's kind of what I did. And I did use Kaplan. I also used UWorld, which is a huge question bank that gives really great explanations after each question. And I thought that was extremely helpful.
Okay. So I hope that that answered both Randy's question and Jordan asked if anyone used Kaplan, and Maya just said that she used Kaplan and UWorld for their study resources. So we'll move on to some more questions. So the next, well, I'll just answer this last one really quick because it fits with this topic. So Nolan just wrote, do you have any recommendations about when to take the MCAT when fitting it in around school, but also early enough to apply at a good time? So if you plan on going to medical school straight from undergrad, then it's best to take the MCAT in your third year of medical school. So you want to think about it in the fall or early spring because applications for medical school open in the summer before you wish to matriculate. So let's say, for instance, you are applying for admission to medical school for fall 2022, which is next year. You should have already taken your MCAT earlier this year, like around spring either fall last year or spring this year. Okay, so you want to take like a year and a half before you apply. That way, you can get your scores back early. If you do well and knock it out the ballpark, that's great. You don't have to worry about it again, but it gives you time. If you need to take it again, you can take it again without missing the application deadline. If you decide that you want to take a break and do graduate school or work or do other things before, the same idea still stands. You want to take it about a year and a half before you plan on entering medical school. So that's a good timeline. All right, so next question about M3 rotations. So this would be any of the residents in Madison who's now in M3. So as you went through M3 rotations, how did you decide on your specialty? And Madison, if you're still deciding, you could just say that, and then we'll go to Molly and Rodolfo.
Yeah. So in terms of like deciding, I think some of the valuable feedback, and I think all the feedback's invaluable, but particularly for me, some of the most valuable feedback that I've gotten throughout some of the rotations I've been on thus far, and guidance of, how to work through what I want to do for the rest of my life, is I think pick something that you can see yourself doing, not just now, but something that you can see yourself doing when you're 50 or when you're in your late 40s, something that has longevity. And I think the other key thing being, and this will become more relevant when you guys get to med school, is residency, and to not be too fearful of the transition between medical student and being a resident, and not letting that like period of very difficult and grueling but very rewarding training deter you away from something you may be genuinely interested in and very passionate about. I think that being said, I'm sort of sitting in a realm of neuro or something that's surgical. But I think at the end of the day, in our fourth year, we have more opportunity to partake in what they call acting internships. And as a third year, we have a little bit of independence in being in the hospital and seeing patients and getting to sort of vibe out, for example, how an internal medicine doctor does their work. What does their sort of life look like? But as an acting intern, we have a lot more responsibility. So we get a lot more feedback of what actually am I going to be doing potentially as an internist, for example. And so I think fourth year is a good time to also help sort out what you want to do. And I think for me, currently, that's probably what I'm weighing on. So I think I just need a little bit more experience to make that decision.
Okay, I can go next. I think it's really important going through your third year rotations to not fall into the trap of being attracted to a field that you are already good at and just saying, okay, I got really great evaluations on this certain rotation, so that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. Sorry, my husband was talking to the cat. I had to ask him to to be quiet. I didn't want you guys to hear how he talks to the animals. But anyway, I think that you can fall into a trap of saying, oh, I'm really good at this, so I want to go into it. But what you need to do is to choose a field that you could, like Madison said, see yourself practicing for the rest of your life. And part of that is to pick a field that you want to learn about for the rest of your life. So for me, that was a really obvious pick. I want to learn about the human brain for the rest of my life.
So I kind of knew that I wanted to do neurology coming into med school. I'd figured that out already, but I actually didn't realize that child neurology was a separate field of study until literally the day that I signed in to the NRMP to make my match applications. And so it sort of realized that, like, hey, I've kind of always had the idea of doing child neurology. I just didn't know that I could go directly to it. But I think what Molly says is really important. Keep an open mind when you're going through your clinical rotations, and don't necessarily close yourself off. You're going to have this existential feeling when you're in the right place, when you're in the right spot, when you're doing the right thing, because you'll feel on all the time, and you'll go home and you won't be tired, and you'll be excited to go back the next day, and it's more, again, of an internal feeling as opposed to the actual things. And to go back to somebody else's question, I was considering neurosurgery. I did like the idea of it, but when I did my surgical rotation, I realized that it just wasn't for me. And again, it all just kind of depends on that existential feeling that you're going to have while you're doing it. So that's what I would rely on the most. Like Molly said, don't necessarily go with what you're good at. Don't necessarily go with what people tell you you're good at. Go with what feels right.
And I'm also going to step in and say something. So there are a few M3 students who rotate with us. And like, I know that there are some higher level specialties. For example, ophthalmology is one of them. And then although they have the background and they have the capacity, they feel that, oh, maybe I'll not make into it. So if you are like one of those M3 students who badly wants to do, but thinks that, oh, okay, you're not up to the mark, don't shy away. There are mentors in each area. There are clerkship directors. Please approach them and speak to them. I recently had to speak with one M3 student. He had everything right, but he thought, he won't make it into a particular subspecialty. I don't think that should be the case. If you think you like something, don't already decide that you're not capable of getting that residency. Please go and approach the clerkship directors. They're very nice. They'll tell you all the methods. I know a couple of M3 students who changed their mind last minute in terms of ophthalmology. I mean, I'm familiar with ophthalmology because, you know, I'm practicing in that area. They made very last minute decisions because they thought they'll never be successful, and both have successfully matched into their residency. So there'll be many M3s like that. So I think this is a time that you should not shy away, but just be bold and go and talk with the clerkship directors. They'll guide you.
All right. So we have a question from Yurim Jaleta, and it's for practicing or training physicians. So this will be Dr. Sudhakar, Dr. Bates, or Dr. Louis. How do you make sure you are keeping up with new findings that come out every day? How can you be sure that the information you have learned has not changed significantly? And that's a very good question.
Yes, I agree. And of course, as you rightly pointed out, we're learning every day. So when we are in a subspecialty, you have to be in those societies. For example, I am a member of American Academy of Neurology and also a member of the North American Neuro-Ophthalmology Society. Both these sites, you know, they keep posting new information. We try to go to these conferences every year to update ourselves. And then we have medical journals which come. Of course, it's not possible, you know, after a hard day's work to come and read every medical journal. So there are tips like, for example, on the AAN, there are like these podcasts we listen to, they give us these updates. Similarly, in the North American Neuro-Ophthalmology Society, we call it the nanos. There are some spotlights which come out saying, hey, you want to know what's going on new, etc. And then when you are in an, we are at an advantage, we're in an academic center. So we participate in research and clinical trials. So we know what drugs are coming out in the market, but it's hard to stay updated. And of course, in the clinic, it's very advantageous to have a medical student or a resident because they will keep questioning you. And that's also a way to go and learn. Like you can always go and revise stuff that you've forgotten about, or say, like, okay, let me look this up and like I'll talk to you tomorrow. So that's another way. And then also patients always bring you these questions and said, oh, I heard that this particular research is going on and this particular drug is being given. What do you know about it? You have to sometimes be open and say, you know what, I really don't know about this, but I will read up or find out and let you know. So be very honest with your patients, but learning is an everyday thing. You can never feel that you know, you're very you're on top of things and you've got the knowledge of everything. And also another way for, I think, faculty to stay involved is by teaching. So many of us, because of academic careers, we're very involved with teaching. So when we teach students, of course, we have to update ourselves. You can't go and teach something that you learned in medical school 10 years ago, which will be so outdated by now. So we have to also update. So there are a lot of ways to stay updated, but it's a continuous process, you know.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to kind of assuage your fears a little bit is, yes, you do have to try and stay up to date, like Dr. Sudhakar is saying, and whenever a patient comes up, you know, you read about it, and that's when you learn, you know, new things that have come up, or if somebody thinks of a disease or in rounds or whatever, and you're like, wait, I haven't read about that in a while, and you go and you look some stuff up. You should do those things, but the latest research that that comes out this past month, it usually doesn't change clinical practice that quickly. Sometimes if it's an incredible impact, it can do it within a couple months. But oftentimes it takes an accumulation of research in order to us for actually make a change in how we do things. So it's not that a research article is going to come out tomorrow and then next week we're going to be doing things differently. That doesn't happen that quickly.
Okay, I just wanted to pause really quickly. It's 10 minutes left, and I know the questions are coming, but I was just thinking in my head, there's some important questions that I want to highlight for the students, because many of you are undergraduates. And I know you may not think to ask these questions, but I think this forum is really important to hear this, and especially since we're recording. Number one, financing medical education. Just going to be quick about that. Medical education, unfortunately, in this country is very expensive, okay? Can run you up in the hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. There are ways, to mitigate that debt. You can get merit scholarships. So at University of Kentucky, there are merit scholarships for students. So just make sure you go to the University of Kentucky College of Medicine website, specifically the admissions page, and look to see what financial options you have. The military is a great option. I had several people in my medical school class go through the military. In the military, all the different branches, they would pay for medical school for students. And not only just pay for medical school, but give you a stipend. So many of my classmates who were in the military, the schools paid for, and they got this monthly stipend to help with living expenses. The thing you have to remember with military is you owe that back. So they're not just paying for you and that's it. After you're done with medical school, most of the time you have to do your residency at one of the military hospitals. If they don't have the specialty you want, then you go to another hospital. But at the end of residency, you do work for the military and you have to pay that back either 4 years or 8 years. I can't remember the time, but that's something to look into. I mean, it's a good opportunity, one, not to come out with a lot of debt. You still get the same education in terms of medical school and residency, but you do have to remember that you would owe the military money after that. There's student loan repayment programs. So the state of Kentucky, as you all know, we have a lot of rural areas with rural hospitals, places that are underserved that don't have many physicians. So many of these places actually do a loan forgiveness program where if you go and work for a rural hospital, they will pay off your loans for you after doing, say, 4 or 5, or how many years are in your contract. My husband actually got loan forgiveness for his medical school after residency. He practiced in a rural hospital and was able to get loan forgiveness. So I just wanted to say this because a lot of times people don't think about financing a medical education until they're getting into it in terms of applying. But you have to make sure that you do think about that when you're applying. And then there's some people who take out loans and have to repay that over years. And I have friends who have been out of medical school 10 plus years are still repaying loans. So again, something that you have to think about. And I just wanted to highlight that briefly in this program. And so we'll get back to questions. Let's see. There was one earlier, it was kind of lighthearted. It was for Dr. Louis, and I'm trying to scroll back to see if I can find it. It had to do with being a chief resident. So somebody wanted to know about really the life of the chief resident. How much are you in the hospital? Oh, I found it. It's from Dalton.
Yeah.
So
I messaged Dalton directly on that one, but
okay.
I can also answer it just so everyone knows. So in child neuro, as the 5th year, you are the chief resident. You don't have to do an extra year for it, and you don't necessarily get any admin time to do the chief things. You're really just in your rotations. The benefit is that this year, I was good about doing a lot of my requirements in the 3rd and 4th year, and so I had 8 months of electives. So my schedule this year is very targeted to what I want to do. I want to go into a fellowship in neurocritical care, in pediatric neurocritical care. And so it's essentially what I make it. So I've made my schedule and I've allowed myself enough clinic time in order to be able to fulfill all of the chief duties. But again, it comes down to time management, which is a skill I hope I've developed well at this point, and one that I will continue to work on. And then somebody else did ask me something about time management, and I think it comes down to a lot of understanding the idea that time management isn't necessarily going to be a static process. That work-life balance thing is not 50-50. It is not going to be the same today as it's going to be next week, as it's going to be next month. It's a very dynamic thing. And so I think time management ultimately comes down not necessarily to managing your time, but being able to successfully manage your priorities. You know, on a particularly heavy week where you have a lot of patients and you have a lot of clinic work to get done, that becomes a priority. On a light week, when you had a heavy week the day before, or had a heavy week the week before, or you've had just come off a difficult rotation, then personal things should be prioritized, and getting yourself back to a good mental place and a good physical place should be prioritized, you know, so that can change day to day, week to week, month to month. And I think knowing that early on is because we all get taught that, you know, time management is the skill that we have to develop. And I think that's, time is not the problem. It's the fact that we have a lot of things to do and we want to do them all. So learning to prioritize the things that we want to do will eventually let you be able to do them all. It's just, you can't do all of them at the same time.
Thank you. We have about 4 minutes left. If anybody has any additional questions, you can put it in the chat. If not, I will ask one final question for everyone. So I want you to give me 2 things. I'll give our audience 2 things. Like, what do you think your strength is? Your strength in terms of becoming a physician or being a physician? What is one strength that you have that you think is important for this field? And I don't want to say the term weakness, but what is one thing that you need to work on in yourself to ensure that you are or will become the great physician that you're destined to be? We can start with Dr. Sudhakar. It was the opposite that we started.
My strength is my perseverance. I don't give up easily, and I stay committed. My weakness is that, like, I'm always expecting things to go well and end soon, even when it comes to like patient care, but that is not true, because there are situations with people don't get well, and there may be some diseases which are complex, and you may have to think out of the box, and you may not be able to solve. So I feel very unhappy in those situations, but I'm slowly learning, you know, especially in neurology, that it's going to be that complex, and I should stop expecting good results always.
Dr. Louis?
I think one of my strengths is, like I was talking about before, just communication and learning to talk to people in order to get things done for patients, and administratively, and doing things together, bringing people into the task, making them feel invested in it. And I think something that I definitely am still working on is the other thing that I was talking about, you know, prioritizing. Sometimes I think my work-life balance internally tips too much towards life, and I think I need to make it tip a little bit more towards work, even though when work is not necessarily the preferred task. But it's something I'm working on, and it's something that's important. And again, it's a dynamic process. You know, it's not something that you're going to learn to do overnight, and it's not something that's going to be the same every day.
Okay, I'll go next. I think one thing, I'll start with the weakness. One thing I'm definitely still working on is just taking my education and my journey to becoming the best neurologist I can be one day at a time, and not just assuming just because I don't know everything at this moment, that means that I'm incapable of it forever. You know, just knowing where I am on the path and knowing that I eventually will get to where I want to be is an important thing. But I think my biggest strength, and something that's helped me so much as a resident, is kind of points to the work-life balance issue, is that where we work so much as residents, you can't put on like a work facade. I had some of my non-medical friends over the other night for dinner, and they were all talking about their work selves and their home selves. And I was like, I'm at work so much, I just have to be my complete self the entire time, or else I'll just can't do it. So it's really important to be yourself at work.
All right.
I think for me, I'll start with weakness, is I struggle to have confidence in spaces that I might perceive to like make me feel small. So as a third year, coming from second year to third year, we have a lot more responsibilities. We're having a lot more involved conversations with doctors that are, 20, 30, 40, possibly 40 years into their career. And these people are they're experts and masters at their art. And I think that for me, it's very, very intimidating. Even though I don't really have a good reason for why I need to be intimidated, because these are teachers, these are very open and warming teachers that are willing to sort of impart knowledge. And so I think that's a weakness, but I think the strength that combats that is that I do things with deliverance and very deeply. And I think that translates over into how I think about patients. Like in med school, you'll learn that there's what we call illness scripts. So like there might be an illness script for someone who comes in with a heart attack, and it's like they're going to present with these symptoms like 90% of the time. But people are individuals, and I think thinking deeply about the individual while still having that illness script and sort of having that text of knowledge in the back of my mind, I think it helps balance things out. And I have seen so far that it's been very helpful, beneficial, and appreciated while sort of like in the very beginning stages of my rotations.
Okay. So I'll just start with, I guess, my strength. For me, I personally am never afraid to ask for help. I'm always trying to, ask questions if I don't understand, just because I know if I'm not reaching out, then I'm not becoming like the potential best physician I can be. So I am always like mentees, colleagues, mentors, like I'm always just asking for help if I need it. And then my weakness, just going back to the imposter syndrome, if I'm having like a tough week or just like a tough class in general, it's very easy to feel like, hey, I'm not getting that concept as quickly as others. Do I belong here? Am I smart enough to be in medical school? So I do struggle with that from time to time, but I'm here for a reason. We're all here for a reason. And so I just kind of have to remind myself of that. So yeah.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for being here. I would like to ask a favor. If everyone could turn on the cameras, I want to take a big picture. As you know, we're not in person, so we have to document what we're doing, right? And usually we take a group picture if this was real life, but I would rather take pictures of your lovely faces than the black boxes with your names on them. So just one brief second, I'll get a screen grab. Okay, let's get some more on the screen. All right, yay, there are people. Hi. All right, let me see if I can get the whole screen filled up. I still see like 5 or 6 names on the bottom. Let's do this, let's do this. All right. Okay, 3 more people. I just need 3 and then we'll have like a full screen. Be brave. This is your first chance of being brave before you could go to medical school. All right. 1 second. Let me get all this stuff off my screen. All right. I think this is the best we're going to do, but this is really good. So look at your camera and smile. Okay, let me see if it came out. One second.
I didn't see the flash.
It worked. It worked. We got it. Thank you all for attending this. As we stated, this has been recorded. I would like to acknowledge Mrs. Anna Stitzer for putting this together and also inviting myself to moderate and all the panelists. Thank you to the panelists, for all of your insight, to all the students participating. We put some of our social media handles in the chat. Please follow us. If you go to UK, you can also reach out via email. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you once again and enjoy the rest of your day.